Chapter 5. When he woke early next morning, the sun was only just opening its own eye on the eastern horizon, and the cottage was full of silence. But she realized that sometime during the night she'd made up her mind she would not run away today. Where would I go anyway, she asked herself. There's nowhere else I really want to be. But in another part of her head, the dark part where her oldest fears were housed, she knew there was another sort of reason for staying at home. She was afraid to go away alone. It was one thing to talk about being by yourself, doing important things, but quite another when the opportunity arose. The characters in the stories she always read seemed to go off without a thought or care. But in real life, well, the world was a dangerous place. People were always telling her so. And she would not be able to manage without protection. They were always telling her that too. No one ever said precisely what it was that she would not be able to manage, but she did not need to ask. Her own imagination supplied the horrors. Still, it was galling, this having to admit she was afraid. And when she remembered the toad, she felt even more disheartened. What if the toad should be out by the fence again today? What if he should laugh at her secretly and think she was a coward? Well, anyway, she could at least slip out right now, she decided, and go into the wood to see if she could discover what had really made the music the night before. That'd be something anyway. She did not allow herself to consider the idea that making a difference in the world might require a bolder venture. She merely told herself consolingly, of course, while I'm in the wood, if I decide never to come back, well, then that will be that. She was able to believe in this because she needed to, and believing was her own true promising friend once more. It was another heavy morning, already hot and breathless, but in the wood the air was cooler and smelled agreeably damp. Winnie had been no more than 2 slow minutes walking timidly under the interlacing branches when she wondered why she'd never come here before. Why, it's nice, she thought with great surprise, for the wood was full of light, entirely different from the light she was used to. It was green and amber and alive, quivering in splotches on the padded ground, fanning into sturdy stripes between the tree trunks. There were little flowers she didn't recognize, white and palest blue, and endless, tangled vines, and here and there a fallen log, half rotted, but soft with patches of sweet green velvet moss. And there were creatures everywhere. The air fairly hummed with their daybreak activity, beetles and birds and squirrels and ants and countless other things unseen, all gentle and self-absorbed and not in the least alarming. There was even, she saw with satisfaction, the toad. It was squatting on a low stump. She might not have noticed it, for it looked more like a mushroom than a living creature sitting there, and as she came abreast of it, however, it blinked and the movement gave it away. "See," she exclaimed, "I told you I'd be here first thing in the morning." The toad blinked again and nodded, or perhaps it was swallowing a fly, but then it nudged itself off the edge of the stump and vanished in the underbrush. "It must have been watching for me," said Winnie to herself, and she was glad she had come. She wandered for a long time, looking at everything, listening to everything, proud to forget the tight-pruned world outside, humming a little now, trying to remember the pattern of the melodies she'd heard the night before. And then, up ahead in the place where the light seemed brighter and the ground somewhat more open, something moved. Winnie stopped abruptly and crouched down. If it's really elves, she thought, I can have a look at them. And though her instinct was to turn and run, she was pleased to discover that her curiosity was stronger. She began to creep forward. She would go just close enough, she told herself, just close enough to see, and then she would turn and run. But when she came near, up behind a sheltering tree trunk, she peered around it. Her mouth dropped open, and all thought of running melted away. There was a clearing, directly in front of her, at the center of which an enormous tree thrust up. Its thick roots rumpled the ground, 10 feet around in every direction. Sitting relaxed, with his back against the trunk, was a boy, almost a man. and he seemed so glorious to Winnie that she lost her heart at once. He was thin and sunburned, this wonderful boy, with a thick mop of curly brown hair. He wore his battered trousers and loose, grubby shirt with as much self-assurance as if they were silk and satin. A pair of green suspenders, more decorative than useful, gave the finishing touch, for he was shoeless, and there was a twig tucked between the toes of one foot. He waved the twig idly as he sat there, his face turned up to gaze at the branches far above him. The golden morning light seemed to glow all around him, while brighter patches fell now on his lean brown hands, now on his hair and face, as the leaves stirred over his head. Then he rubbed an ear carelessly, yawned and stretched, shifting his position. He turned his attention to a little pile of pebbles next to him. As when he watched, scarcely breathing, he moved the pile carefully to one side, pebble by pebble, beneath the pile. The ground was shiny wet. The boy lifted a final stone, and Winnie saw a low spurt of water arching up and returning, like a fountain, into the ground. He bent and put his lips to the spurt, drinking noiselessly, and then he sat up again and drew his shirt sleeve across his mouth. As he did this, he turned his face in her direction, and their eyes met. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, in silence. The boy with his arm still raised to his mouth. Neither of them moved. At last his arm fell to his side. "You may as well come out," he said with a frown. Winnie stood up, embarrassed, and because of that, resentful. "I didn't mean to watch you," she protested as she stepped into the clearing. "I didn't know anyone would be here." The boy eyed her as she came forward. "What are you doing here?" he asked sternly. "It's my wood," said Winnie, surprised by the question. "I can come here whenever I want to. I was never here before, but I could have come any time." "Oh," said the boy, relaxing a little. "You're one of the Fosters, then." "I'm Winnie," she said. "Who are you?" "I'm Jessie Tuck," he answered. "How do?" And he put out a hand. Winnie took his hand, staring at him. He was even more beautiful up close. "Do you live nearby?" she managed at last, letting go of his hand reluctantly. "I never saw you before. Do you come here a lot?" "No one's supposed to. It's our wood." Then she added quickly, "It's all right if you come here. I mean, it's all right with me." The boy grinned. "No, I don't live nearby. And no, I don't come here often, just passing through. And thanks. I'm glad it's all right with you." "That's good," said Winnie irrelevantly, and stepped back and sat down primly a short distance from him. "How old are you anyway?" she asked, squinting at him. There was a long pause. At last he said, "Why do you want to know?" "I just wondered," said Winnie. "All right, I'm 104 years old," he said solemnly. "No, I mean really," she persisted. "Well then," he said, "if you must know, I'm 17. 17? That's right." "Oh," said Winnie hopelessly. 17, that's old." "You have no idea," he agreed with a nod. Winnie had the feeling he was laughing at her, but decided it was a nice kind of laughing. "Are you married?" she asked next. This time he laughed out loud. "No, I'm not married. Are you?" Now it was Winnie's turn to laugh. "Of course not," she said. "I'm only 10, but I'll be 11 pretty soon." "And then you'll get married?" he suggested. Winnie laughed again, her head on one side, admiring him. And then she pointed to the spurt of water. "Is that good to drink?" she asked. "I'm thirsty." Jessie Tuck's face was instantly serious. "Oh, that? No, it's not," he said quickly. "You mustn't drink from it. It comes right out of the ground, probably pretty dirty." And he began to pile the pebbles over it. "But you drank some," Winnie reminded him. "Oh, did you see that?" He looked at her anxiously. "Well, me, I'll drink anything. I mean, I'm used to it. Wouldn't be any good for you, though." "Why not?" said Winnie. She stood up. "It's mine anyway. If it's in the wood, I want some. I'm dry as death." "Believe me, Winnie Foster," said Jessie, "it'd be just terrible for you if you drank any of this water. Just terrible. I can't let you." "Well, I don't see why not," said Winnie plaintively. "I'm getting thirstier every minute. If it didn't hurt you, it won't hurt me. If my papa was here, he'd let me have some." "You're not going to tell him about it, are you?" said Jesse. His face had gone very pale under its sunburn. He stood up and put a bare foot firmly on the pile of pebbles. "I knew this would happen sooner or later. Now what am I going to do?" As he said this, there was a crashing sound among the trees, and a voice called, "Jesse?" "Thank goodness," said Jesse, blowing out his cheeks in relief. "Here comes Ma and Miles. They'll know what to do." And sure enough, a big, comfortable-looking woman appeared, leading a fat old horse, and at her side was a young man almost as beautiful as Jesse. It was Maytuck and her other son, Jesse's older brother, Miles. And at once, when she saw the two of them, Jesse, with his foot on the pile of pebbles and Winnie on her knees beside him, she seemed to understand. Her hand flew to her bosom, grasping at the old brooch that fastened her shawl, and her face went bleak. "Well, boys," she said, "here it is. The worst has happened." Chapter 6. Afterward, when she thought about it, it seemed to Winnie that the next few minutes were only a blur. First, she was kneeling on the ground, insisting on a drink from the spring, and the next thing she knew, she was seized and swung through the air, open-mouthed, and found herself straddling and bouncing back on the back of a fat old horse with Miles and Jesse trotting along on either side, while May ran huffing and puffing ahead, dragging on the bridle. Winnie had often been haunted by visions of what it would be like to be kidnapped, but none of her visions had been like this, with their kidnappers just as alarmed as she was. She'd always pictured a troop of burly men with long black mustaches who would tumble her into a blanket and bear her off like a sack of potatoes, while she pleaded for mercy. But instead it was they, Maytuck and Miles and Jesse, who were pleading. "Please, child, dear, dear child, don't you be scared." This was May, trying to run and call back over her shoulder at the same time. "We wouldn't harm you for the world." "If you'd yelled or anything," this was Jesse, "someone might have heard you, and that's too risky." And Miles said, "We'll explain it soon as we're far enough away." Winnie herself was speechless. She clung to the saddle and gave herself up to the astonishing fact that though her heart was pounding and her backbone felt like a pipe full of cold water, her head was fiercely calm. Disconnected thoughts presented themselves one by one as if they'd been waiting their turn in line. "So this is what it's like to ride a horse. I was going to run away today anyway. What will they say when I'm not there for breakfast? I wish the toad could see me now. That woman's worried about me. Miles is taller than Jesse. I'd better duck if I don't want this next branch to knock me off." They'd come to the edge of the wood now, with no sign of slowing their rapid jog. The road, where it angled across the meadow, was just ahead, dazzling white in the open sunlight. And there, standing on the road, was the man from the night before, the man in the yellow suit, his black hat on his head. Discovering him, seeing his surprise, presented at once with choices, Winnie's mind went perversely blank. Instead of crying out for help, she merely goggled at him as they fled past the spot where he stood. Maytuck was the only one who spoke, and the most she could offer was teaching our little girl how to ride. Only then did it come to Winnie that she ought to shout, wave her arms, do something. But the man had fallen away behind by that time, and she was afraid to let go of the saddle, afraid to turn around lest she fall off the horse. In another moment it was too late. They'd sped up the hill and down the other side, and the opportunity was lost. After another few minutes, the road led them to a place where off to the left a shallow stream looped near the willows and sheltering scrubby bushes. "Stop!" cried May. "We'll stop here." Miles and Jesse grabbed at the horse's harness and pulled up abruptly, nearly toppling Winnie off its neck. "Lift the poor child down," May gasped, her chest heaving. "We'll go catch our breath by the water and we'll try to put things straight before we go on." But the explanation, once they'd stumbled to the banks of the stream, came hard. May seemed embarrassed, and Miles and Jesse fidgeted, glancing at each other. and at their mother uneasily. No one knew how to begin. For her part, Winnie, now that the running was over, began to comprehend what was happening, and with the comprehension her throat closed and her mouth went dry as paper. This was no vision. This was real. Strangers were taking her away. They might do anything. She might never see her mother again. And then thinking of her mother, she saw herself as small, weak, and helpless. And she began to cry suddenly, crushed as much by outrage as by shock. Maytuck's brown face wrinkled in dismay. "Dear Lord, don't cry. Please don't cry, child," she implored. "We're not bad people. Truly we're not. We had to bring you away. You'll see why in a minute. And we'll take it back just as soon as we can. Tomorrow, I promise." When May said tomorrow, Winnie's sobs turned to wails. Tomorrow? It was like being told she'd be kept away forever. She wanted to go home now at once, rush back to the safety of the fence, of her mother's voice from the window. May reached out to her, but she twisted away, her hands over her face, and gave herself up to weeping. "This is awful," said Jessie. "Can't you do something, Ma? The poor Tad." "We ought to have had some better plan than this," said Miles. "That's the truth," said May helplessly. "Dear Lord knows we've had time to think of one, and had to happen sooner or later. We've been plain bone lucky it hasn't happened before now, but I never expected it to be a child." She reached distractedly into the pocket of her skirt and took out the music box, and without thinking, twisted the winding key with trembling fingers. When the tinkling little melody began, Winnie's sobbing slowed. She stood by the stream, her hands still over her face, and listened. Yes, it was the same music she'd heard the night before. Somehow it calmed her. It was like a ribbon tying her to something familiar, she thought. When I get home, I'll tell Granny it wasn't elf music after all. She wiped her face as well as she could with her wet hands and turned to May. "That's the music I heard last night," she managed between recovering snuffles. "When I was out in my yard, my Granny said it was elves." "Dear me, no," said May, peering at her hopefully. "It's only my music box. I didn't suppose anyone could hear it." She held it out to Winnie. "Do you want to take a look at it?" "It's pretty," said Winnie, taking the little box and turning it over in her hands. The winding key was still revolving, but more and more slowly. The melody faltered. Another few widely spaced notes plinked, and then it stopped. "Wind it up again if you want," said May, "clockwise." Winnie turned the key. It clicked faintly, and then, after several more turns, the music began to play again, brisk from its fresh winding and merry. No one who owned a thing like this could be too disagreeable. Winnie examined the painted roses and lilies of the valley and smiled in spite of herself. "It's pretty," she repeated, handing it back to May. The music box had relaxed them all. Miles dragged a handkerchief from a back pocket and mopped at his face, and May sank down heavily on a rock, pulling off the blue straw hat and fanning herself with it. "Look here, Winnie Foster," said Jessie. "We're friends, we really are, but you gotta help us. Come sit down, and we'll try to tell you why." Chapter 7. It was the strangest story Winnie had ever heard. She soon suspected they'd never told it before, except to each other. That she was their first real audience, for they gathered around her like children at their mother's knee, each trying to claim her attention, and sometimes they all talked at once and interrupted each other in their eagerness. 87 years before, the Tucks had come from a long way to the east, looking for a place to settle. In those days, the wood wasn't a wood, it was a forest, just as their grandmother had said, a forest that went on and on and on. They had thought they'd start a farm as soon as they'd come to the end of the trees, but the trees never seemed to end. When they came to the part that was now the wood, and turned from the trail to find a camping place, they happened on the spring. "It was real nice," said Jessie with a sigh. "It looked just the way it does now, a clearing with lots of sunshine, that big tree with all the knobby roots. We stopped and everyone took a drink, even the horse." "No," said May, "the cat didn't drink, and that's important." Yes, said Miles. Don't leave that out. We all had a drink, except for the cat. Well, anyway, Jessie went on, the water tasted sort of strange, but we camped there overnight, and Pa carved a T on the tree trunk to mark where we'd been, and then we went on. They had come out of the forest at last, many miles to the west, had found a thinly populated valley, had started their farm. We put up a house for Ma and Pa, said Miles, and a shack for Jessie and me, and we figured we'd be starting our family soon, and we'd want our own houses. That was the first time we figured there was something peculiar, said May. Jessie fell out of a tree. It was way up in the middle, Jessie interrupted, trying to saw off some big branches before we cut her down, and I lost my balance, and I fell. He landed plumb on his head, said May with a shudder. We thought for sure he'd broke his neck, but come to find out, it didn't hurt him a bit. Not long after, Miles went on, some hunters come by one day at sunset. The horse was out grazing by some trees, and they shot him. Mistook him for a deer, they said. Can you fancy that? But the thing is, they didn't kill him. The bullet passed right through him. Didn't even leave a mark. Then Pa got snake bite. And Jessie ate poisonous toadstools. And I cut myself, said May. Remember slicing the bread? But it was the passage of time that worried him the most. They'd worked the farm, settled down, made friends. But after 10 years, then 20, they had to face the fact that there was something terribly wrong. None of them was getting any older. I was more than 40 by then, said Miles sadly. I was married. I had 2 children. But by the look of me, I was still 22. My wife, she finally made up her mind. I'd sold my soul to the devil. She left me. She went away. She took the children with her. I'm glad I never got married, Jessie put in. It was the same with her friends, said May. They come to pull back from us. There was talk of witchcraft, black magic. Well, you can't hardly blame them. But finally, we had to leave the farm. We didn't know where to go. We started back the way we'd come, just wandering. We was like gypsies. When we got this far, it changed, of course. A lot of the trees was gone. There was people and tree gap. It was a new village. The road was here. But in those days, it was mostly just a cow path. We went on into the wood to make a camp. And when we got to the clearing and the tree and the spring, we remembered it from before. It hadn't changed more than we had, said Miles. And that's how we found out Pa had carved a T on the tree, remember, 20 years before? But the T, it was just where it had been, just like it had just been done. That tree hadn't grown one whit in all that time. It was exactly the same. And the T he'd carved was as fresh as if he'd just been put there. Then they had remembered drinking the water, they and the horse, but not the cat. The cat had lived a long and happy life on the farm, but it died some 10 years before. So they decided at last that the source of their changelessness was the spring. When we come to that conclusion, May went on, Tuck said. That's my husband, Angus Tuck. He said he had to be sure once and for all. He took his shotgun, pointed at himself the best he could, and before we could stop and pull the trigger, there was a long pause. May's fingers laced together, and her lap twisted with the tension of remembering. At last she said the shot knocked him down, went into his heart, had to, the way he'd aimed it, and right through him. Scarcely left a mark, just like a shot, a bullet through water, and he was just the same as if he'd never done it. After that, we went crazy, said Jessie, grinning at the memory. Heck, we was going to live forever. Can you picture what it felt like to find that out? But then we sat down and talked it over, said Miles. We're still talking it over, said Jessie. And we figured it'd be very bad if everyone knowed about the spring, said May. We begun to see what it would mean, she peered at Winnie. Do you understand, child? That water, it stops you right where you are. If you had a drink of it today, you'd stay a little girl forever. You'd never grow up, not ever. We don't know how it works or even why, said Miles. Pa thinks it's something left over from some other plan for the way the world should be, said Jessie. Some plan that didn't work out too good, and so everything was changed except the spring was passed over somehow or other. Maybe he's right, I don't know. But you see, Winnie Foster, when I told you before that I'm 104 years old, I was telling the truth, but really I'm only 17. And as far as I know, I'll stay 17 till the end of the world. Chapter 8. Winnie didn't believe in fairy tales. She'd never longed for a magic wand. She didn't expect to marry a prince, and she was scornful most of the time of her grandmother's elves. So now she sat mouth open, wide-eyed, not knowing what to make of this extraordinary story. It couldn't, not one bit of it, be true. And yet, it feels so fine to tell somebody, Jessie exploded. Just think, Winnie Foster, you're the only person in the world beside us who knows about it. Hold on, said Miles cautiously. Maybe not. There might be a whole lot of others out there wandering around just like us. Maybe, but we don't know about them, Jessie pointed out. We've never had anyone but us to talk to about it. Winnie, isn't it peculiar and kind of wonderful? Just think of all the things we've seen in the world and all the things we're gonna see. That kind of talk will make her want to rush back and drink a gallon of the stuff, warned Miles. There's a whole lot more to it than Jessie Tuck's good times, you know. Oh, stuff, said Jessie with a shrug. We might as well enjoy it, as long as we can't change it. You don't have to be such a parson all the time. I'm not being a parson, said Miles. I just think you ought to take it more serious. Now, boys, said May. She was kneeling by the stream, splashing her face and hands with cool water. Whew, such weather, she exclaimed, sitting back on her heels. She unfastened the brooch, took off her shawl, and toweled her dripping face. Well, child, she said to Winnie, standing up, now you share our secret. It's a big, dangerous secret. We gotta have your help to keep it. I expect you're full of questions, but we can't stay here no longer. She tied the shawl around her waist, then, and sighed. It pains me to think about your mom and pa and how they're worried. But there's just no way around it. We gotta take you home with us. That's the plan. Tuck, he'll want to talk it out. Make sure you see why you can't tell no one. But we'll bring you back tomorrow, all right? And all three of them looked at her hopefully. All right, said Winnie. For she decided there wasn't any choice. She'd have to go. They'd probably make her go anyway, no matter what she said. But she felt there was nothing to be afraid of. Not really. For they seemed gentle in a childlike way. They made her feel old. And the way they spoke to her, the way they looked at her, made her feel special, important. It was like a warm, spreading feeling entirely new. She liked it in spite of their story. She liked them, too, especially Jessie. But it was Miles who took her hand and said, it's really fine to have you along, even if it's only for a day or two. Then Jessie gave a great whoop and leapt into the stream, splashing mightily. What'd you bring for breakfast, Ma? He cried. We can eat on the way, can't we? I'm starving. So with the sun riding high now in the sky, they started off again, noisy in the August stillness, eating bread and cheese. Jessie sang funny old songs in a loud voice and swung like a monkey from the branches of the trees, showing off shamelessly for Winnie, calling out to her, Hey, Winnie Foster, watch me. Look what I can do. And Winnie, laughing at him, lost the last of her alarm. They were friends, her friends. She was running away after all, but she wasn't alone. Closing the gate on her oldest fears, as she had closed the gate of her own fenced yard, she discovered the wings she'd always wished she'd had. And all at once, she was elated. Where were the terrors she'd been told to expect? She couldn't recognize them anywhere. The sweet earth opened out its wide four corners to her like petals on a flower, ready to be picked, and it shimmered with light and possibility till she was dizzy with it. Her mother's voice, the feel of home, receded for the moment, and her thoughts turned forward. Why she, too, might live forever in this remarkable world. she was only just discovering. The story of the spring, it might be true, so that when she was not rolling along on the back of the fat old horse by choice, this time she ran shouting down the road, her arms flung out, making more noise than anybody. It was good, so good in fact, that through it all, not one of them noticed that the man they had passed on the road, the man in the yellow suit, had crept up to the bushes by the stream and heard it all, the whole fantastic story. Nor did they notice that he was following now, beside the road far behind, his mouth above the thin gray beard turned ever so slightly toward a smile. Chapter 9. The August sun rolled up, hung at mid-heaven for a blinding hour, and at last wheeled westward before the journey was done. But Winnie was exhausted long before that. Miles carried her some of the way. The tops of her cheeks were bright pink with sunburn, and her nose a vivid, comic red. But she'd been rescued from a more serious broiling by May, who had finally insisted she wear the blue straw hat. It came down far over her ears and gave her a clownish appearance, but the shade from its brim was so welcome that Winnie had put vanity aside and dozed gratefully in Miles' strong arms. Her own arms wound round his neck. The pastures, fields, and scrubby groves they crossed were vigorous, with bees and crickets leapt before them, as if each step released a spring and flung them like pebbles. But everything else was motionless, dry as biscuits, on the brink of burning, hoarding final reservoirs of sap, trying to hold out till the rain returned, and Queen Anne's lace lay dusty on the surface of the meadows, like foam on a painted sea. It was amazing then to climb a long hill and to see ahead another hill, and beyond that the deep green of a scattered pine forest, and as you climbed, to feel the air ease and soften. When he revived, sniffing, and was able to ride the horse again, perched behind May, and to her oft-repeated question, "Are we almost there?" the welcome answer came at last, "Only a few more minutes now." A wide stand of dark pines rose up, loomed nearer, and suddenly Jessie was crying, "We're home! This is it, Winnie Foster!" And he and Miles raced on and disappeared among the trees. The horse followed, turning onto a rutted path, lumpy with roots, and it was as if they'd slipped in under a giant colander. The late sun's brilliance could penetrate only in scattered glimmers, and everything was silent and untouched, and the ground muffled with moss and sliding needles, and graceful arms of the pine stretched out protectively in every direction, and it was cool, blessedly cool and green. The horse picked his way carefully, and then ahead, the path dropped down a steep embankment, and beyond that, Winnie, peering around May's bulk, saw a flash of color and dazzling sparkle. Down the embankment they swayed, and there it was, a plain, homely little house, barn red, and below it the last of the sun flashing on the wrinkled surface of a tiny lake. "Oh, look!" cried Winnie, "water!" At the same time, they heard two enormous splashes, two voices roaring with pleasure. "It don't take 'em more 'n a minute to pile into the pond," said May, beaming. "Well, you can't hardly blame 'em in heat like this. You can go in too if you want." Then they were at the door of the little house, and Tuck was standing there. "Where's the child?" he demanded, for Winnie was hidden behind his wife. "The boys say you brung a real honest-to-goodness natural child." "So I did," said May, sliding down off the horse, "and here she is." Winnie's shyness returned at once when she saw the big man with his sad face and baggy trousers, but as he gazed at her, the warm, pleasing feeling spread through her again, for Tuck's head tilted to the side and his eyes went soft, and the gentlest smile in the world displaced the melancholy creases of his cheeks. He reached up to lift her from the horse's back, and he said, "There's just no words to tell you how happy I am to see you. It's the finest thing that's happened," and he interrupted himself, setting Winnie on the ground, and turned to May. "Does she know?" "Of course she knows," said May. "That's why I brung her back. Winnie, here's my husband, Angus Tuck. Tuck, meet Winnie Foster." "How do, Winnie Foster," said Tuck, shaking Winnie's hand rather solemnly. "Well, then," he straightened up and peered down at her, and Winnie, looking back into his face, saw an expression there that made her feel like an unexpected present, wrapped in pretty paper and tied with ribbons, in spite of May's blue hat, which still enveloped her head. "Well, then," Tuck repeated, "seeing as how you know, I'll go on and say this is the finest thing that's happened in, at least 80 years.